When I was young, because of my stepfather's job, my family and I ended up moving around Canada quite a few times. We would always be somewhere for about a year or so before we had to pack up and change locations again. As you probably imagine, this made it difficult for me to make friends, as I was constantly coming and going to new schools. During one of these periods, while I was living in British Columbia, I had befriended a classmate of mine named Jessie. I had only known Jessie for a short time during 5th grade in elementary school. I say we were friends, but I wouldn't exactly have called us very close. Sure, most of our time together was spent talking about our favorite video games and TV shows like most friends would, but I don't think we ever hung out outside of school, even once. We were really just school friends, if you get what I mean. When I think back to that time in my life, I don't really recall the details of most of our conversations very well. But there's still always one that I remember perfectly. If not for it, I honestly wouldn't even have remembered Jessie at all. It was on a Monday morning, during recess, when he told me something that gave me more than just the creeps. He said that it had happened to him over the weekend. First off, he went on to tell me about how things usually are for him at home during the night. He had a habit of staying up really late to watch television. He said his parents were very strict about him going to bed early, even if it wasn't a school night, so he wasn't allowed to be watching television late in the evening. But since his parents' bedroom was downstairs, it was easy for him to get away with it as long as he kept the volume turned down. The only thing he had to worry about was if either of his parents needed to use the bathroom, which was right next to his room. Whenever he heard the creaking that signaled someone's ascension of the stairs, he would need to quickly shut off his television set and climb into bed, pretending to be asleep. According to Jessie, that was the most nerve-wracking part, as his TV was a piece of junk that required him to press hard on the power button a few times before the thing would finally turn off. Apparently, his dad had gotten him a TV from the side of the road that someone had obviously placed there to be taken away by the garbage collector. He said the thing even had a small crack on the corner of the screen. Jessie had been pestering his dad for his own TV for a long time, and was always told that they just couldn't afford it. So I guess that was his solution to the problem. Well, I suppose you could say the thing didn't work. Jessie's incident began on Friday evening. It was just past 11 p.m. and he was surfing through the channels looking for something to watch. Among the programs he would usually view around this time would be crime dramas or immature cartoons with humor that catered to adults. Although on that particular night, he told me he couldn't find anything good on that wasn't a rerun. After a little while of searching, Jessie said he'd come across something odd. While switching through channels, he had passed through his video input channel and saw what looked to be a still image of a show on screen. This caught him off guard, as the only feed that should show up on that channel would be from the video game system hooked up to his TV. As Jessie relayed the events to me, he greatly stressed that he was absolutely sure that there wasn't anything else plugged in that could have been the cause of the image displayed on his screen, and that he wasn't simply seeing things because of a lack of a proper sleep schedule. I remember stopping him at this point to assure him that I wasn't doubting him, and for him to tell me more about what he saw on the screen. Of course, even back then I knew better than to trust everything that came out of an 11-year-old's mouth, so I was a bit skeptical of his claims, but I was very curious to hear what he had to say. Jessie told me that on his screen, he saw what looked to be a black and white still picture of a living room. After a few more seconds of staring, his assumption was proven wrong when he saw movement at the far wall. From a door that could be seen in the back, an old man came out and sat down on the living room couch. As he did, The old man's head fell back on the cushions, and he closed his eyes like he were taking a nap. After this, nothing else happened, and the same sight of the old man napping on the sofa remained for several minutes. Jesse at this point had decided to turn off the TV, feeling a little nervous and confused over what was happening. He described it like you were watching someone's home movie or something. Now that I'm older, I can only guess that what he meant was that it looked to be filmed on some old camcorder or the like. The next morning, the first thing Jesse did was turn on the TV to see if the sight of the old man remained. To his relief, the video input channel was normal, and he went about his Saturday like usual. Jesse told me that during the following night he didn't feel like staying up late after what had happened before. However, he found it difficult to fall asleep when he began to wonder if the image on the TV would appear again. Curious, he eventually mustered up the courage to turn on the TV once more. After fiddling with the power button for a second, Jesse turned on the TV and switched to the video input, and gasped at what he saw. There again, the old man sat in his seat as if he never moved. Only this time, there seemed to be something different about him. Jesse described him as looking skinnier and just more creepier to look at. As he spoke, I could tell that he was struggling to put words to what he witnessed. At this point, Jesse had had enough. He was beginning to feel really uncomfortable, so he powered off the TV and went back to bed. Nothing unusual happened during the next day. The input channel was normal, and at this time, Jesse was half convinced he was dreaming everything. He had thought about telling his parents, but his story sounded so ridiculous when he ran the words through his head that he knew they'd also tell him that it was only a dream. He pushed the image of the old man to the back of his mind and tried to enjoy the rest of his weekend. It was during the third night that things became horrifying. Jesse had avoided turning on the TV altogether that evening and had gone to bed early for once. Unfortunately, he could not fall asleep. He couldn't shake the possibility of it all being just a dream from his mind, and wanted to know for sure. After pinching himself to make absolutely certain that he was wide awake, and double-checking to make sure there were no devices connected to the TV, he put his finger to the device's power button and gave in to his curiosity. Upon seeing what was on the screen, he screamed for his parents. This was when I became completely convinced that Jesse was telling the truth to me. If it were a lie, every other kid in the world would be trying to stop themselves from laughing or smiling if they spoke the words that he was about to say to me. But I will never forget that look of genuine horror that he had on his face when he told me what he saw. "A rotting, dead body," he said. His face grew pale as he spoke those words. We were just kids, so neither of us would have had the words in our vocabulary to describe the sight in detail. But Jesse still did his best. "It was like a skeleton, but with skin, and there were flies buzzing all around it," he said. He told me that the images on the screen had vanished by the time his parents rushed to his side. They comforted him, and as he tried to tell them what he saw, they assured him that it was just a nightmare, that there was nothing to be afraid of. I wanted to tell Jesse to stop now, as I was getting a little scared myself just from hearing him say it. But before I could, he told me one last thing about that night. Jesse said that while he was crying for his parents, he noticed something on screen in the room with the old man's body. Something that he'd completely missed during the previous 2 nights. On a wall in the back, there was a large round mirror that hung and showed in its reflection the side of the room that couldn't be seen by the TV's viewer. He said that he could see another television set in the mirror's reflection. One with a small crack on the corner of its screen.